I come to you first. It would seem that Greece is now the potential catalyst for a crisis in the Eurozone, correct?
Well, the extraordinary thing is that, with or without Greece, the Eurozone is trembling on the verge of its third recession in 6 years. And I think this, therefore, has to be said to go beyond one country with one debt problem. According to the IMF, in 2014, every part of the world grew except the Eurozone. North America, South America, Asia, Australia, Africa. We are in the only bit of the world that is shrinking, the only customs union that's declining economically. And the reason that's happening is partly because of long-term demographic trends, but partly because we are exacerbating the debt crisis by this absolute insistence on keeping the euro together, whatever the cost to its constituent nations.
Vicky Price,
it's so big that I don't think the Europeans will be able to do it.
Dan Hannam, those of us who've read our Fisher, the deflationary debt trap, know all about this. And this is a situation where when inflation gets so low that it's either zero or tips into deflation, your national debt becomes a bigger and bigger percentage of your national wealth. And it becomes well nigh, as the Japanese have shown over the past 15 years, to get out of this. Is that a proper analogy for the situation the Eurozone now finds itself in?
It's much more than an analogy, Andrew. I mean, that is not an abstract theory. That's what has happened to Italy. Italy, to a single approximation, has not grown since it joined the euro. And the Italian debt, therefore, keeps increasing, not because Italy is borrowing more, but simply because its economy isn't growing, basically not growing at all. And this is an avoidable problem. Leaving the euro wouldn't solve everything for these countries. I'm not going to pretend that for a moment. But devaluing, decoupling, and beginning to price their way back into the market, to export their way back to prosperity, would at least give them some breathing space, some time in which to make the structural reforms that they need. You know, we have a situation. Look at what's happening politically. Podemos is now ahead in the polls in Spain. Syriza is ahead in the polls in Greece. These are... It's not often one gets to say this about Trotskyists, but they got this one absolutely right. They said right from the beginning that the euro would be a racket which would benefit wealthy bankers and bondholders and clobber ordinary people. And that's exactly what's happened, which is why they're now being rewarded at the polls.
Which I think might be a great shock to them when they realise that that's not the case.
Dan Hannam, is Mr. Draghi, the president of the European Central Bank, who has clearly been wanting to do something for quite some time on the QE, on the print money front, is he not something now of a busted flush? Has he not just been neutralised by the Germans?
You know, I think the problems are so deep-rooted and go back such a long way that it's difficult to see how monetary stimulus alone is going to solve things. Even if you're a believer in monetary stimulus as an instrument of policy, you'd be hyper-optimistic to think that as long as the euro is there, that more QE is going to get Europe out of its problem. Do you know what I think is the real fear in Brussels, the real fear for Mrs. Merkel and the Eurocrats? It's not that Greece will leave the euro and fail. It's that Greece will leave the euro and prosper, and thereby be an inspiration to all the other countries that are suffering unnecessarily, and that will begin the unravelling of the whole project.